your boy Wolfrock, aka Wolfrock Trucking, coming to you guys with a little bit more of an explanation, another episode of Trucking with Swift and what to expect and what not to expect. Today we're going to talk about, yes, clocks. What the heck is a driver clock? You've heard maybe drivers or other people talking about what is a clock. We all are governed, truckers are governed by what's called a clock. And I'm going to go a little bit over it. I'm not going to make a big, long video of it, but I wanted to show you guys, tell you guys a little bit about what it is and the expectations that is required by the federal government that we have to adhere to as a trucker. And we're limited based on a clock. Not like the good old days that people can doctor their time on the road by having two logbooks. You can't do that anymore. So let's talk about that. We're going to talk about a couple clocks and we'll go over them real shortly. So let me get this off here and let me show you this. So these are the clocks that I'm talking about. You got to say, what are you talking about? This makes no freaking sense. So we're going to talk about each one of these. So the first one we're going to talk about is a 70-hour clock. What is our 70-hour clock? I'll tell you in a minute. 11-hour clock, an 8-hour clock, a 10-hour clock, and a 34-hour clock. We'll talk about all these clocks, and we're not going to go in depth. If you want to know more, let me know in the comments below, and I'll tell you more about each one. But we're going to cover some of these right now. So let's go with the 70-hour clock. What is a 70-hour rule for the federal government, aka DOT regulations for us as truck drivers? Well, it's pretty much this. It's basically 70 hours is an 8-day rule, or 60 hours is a 7-day rule. It is the total time that you spend driving and on duty, and those hours cannot exceed 70 hours in an 8-day period. And 60 hours would be a 7-day period. Now, the 60 hours is for local drivers versus long hauls over the road that are more 70 hours. In other words, drivers have a limited number of hours that can't be on duty per cycle per week. So, what does that mean exactly? So, in other words, I get in my truck. I start it up. All right? The clock doesn't start yet. It does not start until I log in and tell it what I'm about to do. I'm going to tell that 70-hour clock that I need to do a pre-trip. That would be considered on duty. So you would tell the log, I'm on duty, and notate it doing pre-trip. You do your pre-trip. Normally they take about 15 minutes to about 40 minutes-ish. That's the time frame, depending on if you're doing a post-trip or a pre-trip. If you're doing a pre-trip, technically there should be about 25 to 30 minutes average. So let's just use a number of 30 minutes so it makes it a lot easier for the math. So you have a 70-hour clock. You just used up 30 minutes. You now have 69 hours and 30 minutes of driving and on-duty hours within that 70-hour clock. Not bad. You still got time, right? So then you pull out, you start driving. Let's say you drive for 2 hours and you need to get fuel. Now, your 70-hour clock is still going, right? So you've used 2 hours. You've now at 69 and a half hours. You take 2 hours off. You're now at 67 and a half hours. You stop at a fuel station. You're no longer driving, but now you're on duty fueling. That is part of your 70-hour clock. So now you are going to use, let's say it takes you 30 minutes, hypothetically, just for using numbers. It takes you 30 minutes. You get fueled up, you get back in your truck, you start driving. You now have used up 30 minutes of your 70-hour clock, so now you are at an even 67. So you can see how that works. That also works for DOT stops. That works for anything that has to do with unloading or loading a truck. Those are all hours that gets taken off of that 70-hour clock. Once you have exhausted your 70-hour clock in that 1 week, you're done. You cannot go anywhere else. You cannot drive. You cannot go any place else. You have used up all your resources within your 70-hour clock. Does that make sense? All right, pretty easy. Next one down. So let's talk about this, the next one. The The next one is called this 11-hour clock. This 11-hour clock is actually super important for your daily usage. You have, and I forgot one. There's actually a 14-hour clock, and I apologize. I didn't put that on there. There is a 14-hour clock that's also not on there. The 14-hour clock is super important. It's actually more important than the 11-hour clock. The 14-hour clock is what you can use in a day. In any given day, you can use 14 hours to do whatever is necessary, from driving to doing pre-trips, unloading, loading, whatever comes. So if you take that 70-hour and then you spread it out and use like a 14-hour ratio and do 14 hours, you would get, that's what you would use within that day. So that 14 hours. And within that 14 hours, you can only drive a maximum, that's a maximum of 11 hours. Right there. That 11 hours is your maximum amount that you can drive in a one-day period, or a 14-hour clock. So your 14 hours, you got 11 hours. That can be used for driving purposes, if that makes sense. So the other 3 hours that are on there on the 14 are basically fueling, you backing in to a truck, to docks, things of that nature. So those are all things that use up that 14-hour clock. Also, waiting for a load also uses that 14-hour clock. And when that happens, it takes away from your driving clock as well, because your 14-hour clock eats up some of that 11 hours as well. So that's the reason why you have to manage your hours. I know this is a little bit confusing, but that's what we have to be as truck drivers. You have to use that on a daily basis. You have to be a good time management when it comes to clocks. And the next one down is an 8 hours. That 8 hours is your break time. They have a regulations that you have within that 8 hours. You are required by DOT and by the federal government to take a 30-minute break. That is required. You cannot go away from it. You have to take a 30-minute break. So if you go past that 8 hours and you're at 8:01, you're in violation, and you can get cited for that because you did not take a 30-minute break. It's really important that you do a 30-minute break within 8 hours. So you have to plan that in your day. That 30 minutes can include you parking at a truck stop, getting fueled, and getting food, and doing little things at a truck stop, going to the bathroom, using up that 30 minutes during that time. I've seen a lot of truck drivers do it that way. And that takes care of your break. As long as you meet that 8 hours, what it'll do is you take your 30-minute break. It'll reset. Once you start driving, it'll reset for another 8 hours. So technically, if you had the hours, which you wouldn't, you could drive for another 8 hours, and within that 8 hours, you can take another 30 break. But obviously, you couldn't because of your 14-hour clock. So now, the 10-hour clock, what is that? So now, you've driven 11 hours. You've taken your break. You've done your 11 hours of driving, and your 14-hour clock is done. You're parked for the night, and you need to reset your clock. So all your clocks have been used. Your 14, your 11, your 8, those are all done. In order for you to move any further into the next day, you have to do what's called a 10-hour clock. You have to sleep, rest, whatever the case may be, for 10 hours with no on duty, no driving, no nothing for 10 hours. Once your 10 hours are up, your clocks, all those clocks that we just talked about, automatically resets, except for your 70-hour clock. The one, well, let's see. Is it this way? How does it do it? It's right there. That one right there. Yeah, that one right there. That 70-hour clock does not reset. It actually stays running when you are driving, when you're on duty. It continues to go. It does stop when you do your 10 hours. Your 10 hours, your 70-hour clock does not run because you're not on duty and you're not driving. So you're what's called off duty. And when you're off duty, you're resting, you're taking that 10 hours to do whatever necessary. Take a shower, eat, get at least an 8 hour sleep, things of that nature. So that resets your 14-hour clock, your 11-hour clock, and your rest period. So all three of those get reset for another day's worth of driving. And when you start driving, your 70-hour clock starts running again. Or if you're on duty doing your pre-trip, that your 70-hour clock is running. Now, 34-hour clock. This is the last clock that's kind of an important clock when your 70 hours, keep doing it that way right there, your 70 hours runs out. So let me give you an example. Last month when I was doing my time, I came close to being in violation of my 70-hour clock. So I had about 3 minutes left on my clock. I had to pull into a terminal and make sure that I was stopped off duty before I got into a violation. And once you get to that point where you don't have any more of your 70-hour clock, you have to do what's called a 34-hour reset. Or if you're within the 8 days and you have hours on the 9th day, those hours will accumulate back onto your 70-hour clock, and you can use those. Those are reusable hours that you can use within your 70-hour clock. This is so confusing, I know. But let's say you don't, and you have to reset. Once you stop, you have to stop for 34 hours before you can do anything else. And you have to wait for your 70-hour clock to reset to 70 hours. And then you can start fresh with a fresh clock. It'll reset every single one of them, and you can go again. These are the things that you have to understand as a truck driver we are responsible for. We have to maintain, and all this is to protect and the safety of those around you. From when you're driving loads, you're not exhausted, you're not tired, and it also protects you to be aware and alert while you're driving, and less people falling asleep behind the wheel. A lot of these accidents that are happening is because people are not alert. They have not rested. They have not followed the process. They've pushed themselves. They stayed awake instead of being asleep. There's a lot of things that goes on. But if you follow your clock and you do what you're supposed to do, you'll be rested and you'll be ready to go for your next day so you can do deliveries. And as you know, the wheel spins, you make money. That's how it rolls. So hopefully this wasn't too confusing as it is. Let me know in the bottom. I'll be more than glad to help you understand these clocks. I apologize that I didn't have the 14-hour clock on there because that's actually pretty important. I can't believe I forgot that one. But I thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments of what you want to know about trucking. Let me know anything you want to know. The ins and the outs. I'll be more than glad to answer it. And if I don't know, I will make sure to find out for you so that you can know as well. If you want to know more about Swift, and you want to know how to get into getting your CDL license through Swift, let me know in the comments below. I will send you a private message with my driver number, and you can reach out to a recruiter, and they'll be more than glad to help you as well. I'm all about supporting our trucking industry and doing what I can to make sure that people are safe, and also making sure that there's more truckers out there. As the older ones retire, we need other drivers to get out there and deliver loads so that our country can stay running and functioning. Without truck drivers, man, a lot of our freight will not get to where it needs to go. So we depend on truck drivers to get our freight, and so that we have groceries on our shelves and we have product on our shelves. So these are important things, and thank goodness for the family of truckers that are out there that do what they do. My heart goes out to all of them. I know how hard they work. A lot of you don't realize that there's a lot of efforts, just like what you saw with the clock. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes of truck driving. This is just one piece of it that's very important to maintain the integrity of who you are as a truck driver. So I thank you so much. Hopefully that helped. I will talk to you guys next time. This is your boy, Wolf Rock, aka Wolf Rock Trucking. As we say here, let's keep rolling. Peace.